Today, I'm going to show you how I turned this photo into this photo without using presets. When looking at this photo, I noticed that I had to focus on the flowers rather than her, so I know I had to immediately crop close in the photo to balance out the image. This draws more of a focus onto the flowers themselves rather than the background and her. Honestly, the crop helps a lot, but to get to where we are here, we have to go through color grading and color mixing. If you're like me and you're not working with presets, the biggest thing that you will always do is going to be your color grading. For this specific photo, I knew I wanted a great contrast, so I used orange and blues. Now, the reason that I'm not doing all just orange is because it would make her skin become very, very orange, which is not the goal. Whenever you're using the color wheel, you want to make sure that you're picking two opposite colors. To kind of cancel out the yellow tones that were going on in the photo, I wanted to make her skin tone be a little bit more blue tinted, so I knew that my shadows and highlights would be orange to complement the contrast. Then I went to the color mixing and chose specific colors that I knew I wanted to bump up or desaturate. You'll notice when you play around with color grading, it's all going to be very minor things that you will be changing. You don't want to go too harsh on something because then it can very much make colors seem completely out of whack and make your gallery look a little funky. Pretty much I wanted to saturate the greens and the reds in this photo specifically so that I could counter her and have more of a focus on the flowers themselves. The next thing that you have to do is going to be your basic editing. In this photo, I knew I had to go pretty hard on the exposure because of the time of day that we were shooting this photo at. So I bumped it up to about 6.6. And then I just did some slight edits on the highlights, shadows, and whites because I knew that most of my edits were going to be on the masks. For masks, I'll always do pretty much the same thing of having a subject mask and then a non-subject mask, aka the background. The first thing I did is I touched the subject mask. This is where I fine-tune exactly how I want her to look without looking at how she looks compared to the background. And I knew that I wanted to bump up the exposure just a little bit more, increase the contrast, the shadows, and the whites, and then decrease my highlights and my blacks to counter the shadows and the whites that I had to pull up to find more detail in the photo. Overall, it also evened out the flowers, which is exactly what I was going for, to have that harsher contrast between her and the flowers rather than them blending. The background is actually where it became the harder part. I very much did not want the background to blend into the greens of the stems, so I knew that I had to darken the background to contrast that. However, we're still kind of getting that darker look, so I did bring the exposure back up to about 37, so that the photo didn't look like it completely killed the background. Overall, the masks were able to take this to this, a much more clear separation in background, as well as a much more even skin tone overall. So here's the before and the after. How do we think I did without using presets?